Let's chat the 10 lessons for planning your upcoming homeschool year. What are your challenges that you're anticipating as you're walking into homeschool? I hear it in a buzz around me, and I also know it for myself that it feels like this last year and a half have been very long and dragging. So a lot of us are not really in planning mode to our homeschool. In fact, between you and me, I'm helping everybody else plan, but I'm not planning for my own homeschool. And I'm not that motivated. That's the truth. So that's my challenge. What's your challenge? I know sometimes we figure out how we wanted to show up in our homeschools. Like our last homeschool year, we had this idea of how we're going to show up in our homeschool, and we didn't. That can be a common challenge. Frankly, it's a challenge we all experience on repeat every year. We ask ourselves, how do we want to show up for our homeschools? How about our vision? We have a vision for our homeschools usually when we first start because we have an idea of why we're doing it, but we don't really create a mental version of what we're intending to do. We walk into it and we realize that even the things that we thought would be amazing about it, they are not every day, and we kind of need to recreate our vision. Not to mention that our kids actually grow up. We actually come a little clearer with ourselves and who we are and what we're all about. There's always things changing in our family, in our homeschools, in our world. So something's always throwing a wrench into what we intended originally for our homeschool. Do we have a vision? So you may have heard me share this with you before, but the whole reason that I actually wrote a book, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Nurturing the Nurturer, is because I hit a wall. In about my 4th year of February, a slump month, and I remember thinking, where is the yellow bus, the yellow school bus? I just want to line my kids up and get them on there because I am done with homeschooling. And that happened to me not once, at least a couple times. Or even just that feeling of, why am I doing this? I don't like this. I know it's the best thing for my kids. I've got this idea that I want to do this and show up in this way in my kids' world, but I'm so done with it. And you are not the first. Many of us have been there, done that. We have felt that kind of frustration. And there's many reasons that we all feel different frustrations in our homeschool, because sometimes how we're doing it is actually fueling a frustration, but also the pressure from other people because we're actually expecting to follow what they're doing, or at least make them happy in our choices. Bad idea, but it is our natural go-to. And there's so many reasons why we might be frustrated. So today, I'm going to present you both a list of 10 meta lessons that I encourage you to consider in your homeschool planning. And then I thought, you know what? Some of you know me that I like going meta, but there are also some practical tips that I can offer you. 10 practical tips. So grab your cup of tea, I'll take a deep breath, and a little bit of tea from my garden. Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to share with you, is that I have a PDF, one that I happen to have written on, but I've got a free PDF available for the 10 lessons for planning your upcoming homeschool year in the link in my bio that you can download. Second thing is, let's get started. 10 meta lessons. The first one is work toward realistic in your time and your ability to be present. This is one of the biggest things that from one veteran homeschool mom to another, you need to hear. Your goal is about being realistic, also having fun, but we'll talk about that later. Being realistic, and we all know that that is really difficult for us because we have lofty goals for our children and how we show up in our homeschools. So first and foremost, time block. Actually figure out how much time everything is really taking you. Like, not how much you think it might be taking you. Actually spend a week trying to figure out how much time each activity takes you. Because if you're like me, you'll discover that actually you can't do everything. Make sure the kids are happy and in the car and into town in 15 minutes. If you've been to my home, you know that it's an impossibility, even if you are in a rush. So time block actually helps you to figure out, can I actually fit these things into my day? And be present. The goal is always to be present with our kids, but also with the activities that we're choosing to do for ourselves as well. Whatever we're doing, our goal is to be present in it. Lofty goal right there, isn't it? But when we do that, we feel so much more at peace and the ability to enjoy the moment. And it might be pointing you to the fact that you got too much on your plate, you're expecting too much of yourself, or falling in line with the expectations of what other people have of you. Okay, so the second meta lesson for you to plan your upcoming homeschool year is that self-care is a requirement, not an option. There's a reason I wrote the book, because I learned that I'm another human being alongside my kids. A human being that has needs, that has challenges, that has triggers, that is emotionally expended by certain things. We all have different things, but we are all humans and we all have needs, even moms. And if that be the case, that means we're going to have to actually time block some time for ourselves or meet the needs that we have that we know that we're ignoring. Yeah, that one. The one that I just triggered you to think about, that's one that needs your time, needs your attention. And as I say, you need to nurture the nurturer, and that is just your reality. You are essentially like a biodegradable compost for your garden. You want stuff to grow? In your family, you're going to have to add some compost. You are the compost. Okay, so third thought. You can influence your children, but you cannot control them. Girlfriend, ask me how I know this tip. I got a few disappointing failures under my buckle because of learning this tip. There's no doubt this one is a very challenging one to accept, and frankly, when they're littler, you kind of think you can do it until they're older and they show you you can't. You can influence them though. You can influence them for the rest of your life if you have a good relationship with them. But if you have unrealistic expectations of them, if you're not fully authentic with them, well, you're really breeding a less good relationship and not as healthy relationship. And therefore, you're not actually able to influence them as much as you'd like to think you are. Also, if you really want to influence them, you're going to have to accept the fact, and maybe it's the same thought, but I just want you to hear it in a different way, that when we really want to influence them, we accept the fact that they're actually separate human beings. They learn a lot from us. Just as I say they're our mini mirrors, we are also theirs. And they learn a lot from us. They are naturally imprinted by us, but we have to acknowledge that they are different human beings than us, and they don't always think the same, even when we really, really want them to think the same. Again, ask me how I know. You really can, DM me. So, next thought, the fourth lesson is academics are not synonymous with education. We were taught that they are. They can be. They are not necessarily. I ask, what is an education anyways? That root word of education is educato. It's a Latin word that means to raise up. Raise up what? Raise up your specific child. When you get to know your specific child, observe your specific child, and they continue to develop themselves and have enough freedom to allow their curiosities or their aptitudes in their life, you will gradually see who they are, and they will make sure to share it, make sure to let you know, and then you can create resources and curriculum and tools and mentors and courses and whatever the context that helps raise them up to be the people they were meant to be. Fifth lesson, you will have to answer the S question into infinity and beyond. I would love to hear from you how many have actually heard the S question this year, this past year. If you don't know what the S question is, I'm guessing that you are just starting out in homeschooling and you can ask me about that. But for the rest of us, are you really a homeschooler if you haven't been asked about the S question? So the S question is something that you are going to have to answer to. Don't invest your emotional energy into random people on the street and their questions about homeschooling, like the S question. Create little mental essays in your head to address every random person in the grocery store about their concerns about your child's socialization. Just come up with the plan to address that question. You decide how you're going to address it. You do not have to have a conversation with them at all, except to say, yeah, they're not in school today. Or, yeah, I'm not concerned. Or whatever you decide, but decide how you're going to engage it. You don't need to invest your emotional energy, your defensiveness in planning for your answer, though. Sometimes we need to practice mental boundaries. Boundaries are probably the number one reason most people tire out or get exhausted in their homeschools, or try to manage unrealistic expectations in their homeschools because of their own internal expectation or other people's expectations of how they're supposed to homeschool. You have to create mental boundaries. I wouldn't go so far as saying I just don't care what other people think, because that's just not real. We all do care about some people's thoughts about our homeschool or about our lives or about us and what they think about us. We can be honest about that. However, we have to practice caring more about what we think about something than what someone else thinks. And if we really want to do this homeschool thing, then we have to decide what are the reasons and what's the answer we're going to give people when they ask the questions. Okay. You may be, this is the 6th lesson, you may be the greatest educational recipient in your homeschool, right? Can I hear an amen? That is, I can't tell you how many things I've learned in the course of my homeschool. So many things, like right down from basic math all the way to probably grade 9. After grade 9, I'm still lost. But there's geology, plate tectonics, and some things into astrophysics we've gone into. How about history? Tons of history that I had no idea about until I was a homeschool mom. But really, there's endless things that we could talk about that we learn because we're learning alongside our kids. So we are the greatest educational recipients. But I encourage you to also include you in your homeschool this year, in the academic or the educational opportunities that you create for your kids. Maybe include ones that you also want to do because you are interested. When they see that you're impassioned by something, oftentimes they come alongside you purely because they see you're excited by it. So include you too. Number 7 is there is no right way to homeschool. And I truly believe that. In fact, if you have done this long enough, you'll realize that you have taken on most of the homeschool philosophies at some point. You heard about Montessori. You heard about all, Charlotte Mason and unschooling and la 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 la. You can fill in the blank. And you're like, that's cool. I should do that. And maybe you fling into that philosophy full throttle, or maybe you just take 1 or 2 things from it. But whatever the case, they're all great. They've all got many different ideas. And I will never encourage you to take one on with a religious vengeance, because it also means that you're taking on the expectations of what people think that philosophy actually is. And are you actually measuring up in that philosophy? And who cares? Because we're talking about your kids and you and your partner if you have one. It's about you guys deciding whether you think something is pertinent or useful for you and your children and their homeschool. So dabble in them all, take them all, enjoy them all, but recognize that there ain't no one right way to homeschool. The 8th thought is everything really won't go well all the time. There's a reason I say to capture or to turn your challenges into your charms, to reframe them or try to recreate the perspective, or ask yourself, why am I challenged by this? And let's see how we can turn these into charms. The reason I talk about that is because there's challenges. There's a couple challenges. And we all have different kids. We all have different families. We all come from a different family. We all have different life histories and different experience with what education is anyway. And all of that influences what our challenges might be. But if you signed up for homeschool to be the utopia that I signed up for, it's not a thing. Frankly, the one thing that you can control is you. And that's hard too. There's a lot to learn in that. My next thought coincides with that one. It is to know yourself, how you relate, and what you need. Those things were not on the tip of my tongue when I first started homeschooling. In fact, it was like years in when I finally watched a TEDx talk by Brené Brown that made me think about me and wondering, hey, who am I and how do I fit in my homeschool anyway? You have to be able to understand you, what triggers you, what your emotional challenges are, learn how to reframe them, maybe get a different perspective on some challenge, be open to that, actually be open to growing and recognizing that you won't get to the sweet spot. There will always be something else to learn. Welcome to life. And yet, that is the only thing you can control, is you. Which can be a challenge, right? I would know too. And the last thing that I would tell you to consider, a meta thought to consider in planning for your upcoming homeschool, is the goal is fun. So you've heard me talk about challenges and acknowledging that every day is not going to be a perfect day. It won't be a charmed life all the time. And yet, I think the goal should be to have fun. If you're not having fun, like why? Why are we doing this anyway? It's not always going to happen. You're going to plan something fun and your kids are going to not think it's fun, or they're going to be out of sorts that day, or bickering, or you fill in the blank. We all know that. But the goal is fun. There's a lot of research about play-based learning these days, and I'm pretty sure it's just going to hit out the stratosphere and everybody's going to accept it, assume that it's like the baseline understanding about learning and education, but it's not quite there. It's just starting right now. Not just them, but us too. We should be in a place of always trying to engage things in play. That is how we learn. That is how our children learn. So if we use that as the background premise to planning all of our homeschool stuff, no, you do not have to create a party, a unit study, a lap book out of everything you do. I'm not saying balloons every day and everybody's got brownies and poetry tea time at 10 o'clock sharp every weekday. I'm just like, the goal is fun. Then you will actually create the charmed homeschool that you really want. Okay, so remember, there's a free PDF, not all marked up, in the link in my bio that you can download for that. Now, I'm going to show you the 10 practical tips to homeschooling this year. First is at 4 p.m. or at a time common to when all your family is kind of wrapping up their typical stuff in the day, put stuff away. Put stuff neatly away. Make sure that everybody knows where exactly everything goes. And especially find out where their erasers are, check for pencils, and definitely scissors. First thought, under the sofa cushions. But if you can do that every day, you actually might, maybe, tell me if this happens to you in your home, but you might actually find that stuff again. Okay, second thought, once a day or week, bullet point what you actually did. I know some people talk about creating these longer narratives, but I like creating longer narratives for actual fictional stories or for articles or for course writing or for a book, but I'm not really into writing narratives of all the things that we did in a day. What I do is bullet point. Frankly, I just use a schedule, a day timer, and I write with different colored pens for different kids the general things that they did. And I typically do it once a day, but I know that everybody would think that that is a bit overkill. It does help me remember, but if you can even do it after a week of the things that you did, the things that you read, the things that you watched, the things that you projects or field trips, whatever, write it down, because at the end of the year, you can do this rather, I'd say, tedious thing that I have not yet done and intend to do in this week, is to write down all the things they actually did and realize we did a lot of things for our homeschool. It is an amazing thing, really, just for your mental space to understand that they really are getting an education. The third thing is don't be the only person to read aloud. If your kids can read, of course. So if they can read, then for your 15 to 30 minutes or whatever time you have to do a read aloud with your kids, for us for many years it was at 8:30 in the morning. Grab your drawing book or your quilting or your crocheting or whatever craft or something for your hands to do or to enjoy while your child is doing a read aloud. Not only is it obviously time for you to do something for yourself, but you actually get a really clearer picture of where they're at reading. And it definitely encourages them to understand vocabulary and reading. It's a different part of the brain that's used when you read it out loud. The fourth thought is try not to do other stuff while your child is working beside you. There was a time where I used my screen when I really shouldn't have. I am a mom that will encourage anybody to limit kids with screen time. Yeah, I'm that mom. Because when they use it, you will be able to do other stuff if they don't have access to it all the time. And also, I genuinely don't think it's useful for any of us to have screen time all the time. Not even us. And so set it aside, put it out of the room, turn off all those notifications, and make sure that you are truly with your child. If there is something that you're doing formally with them, or even if you're just sitting with them to write a story together or do a craft together or a game or something, give them the full eyeball attention. Teaches you to focus too. The fifth thought is that thought. I jumped a thought. Okay, so short, focused math lessons. Something that I was first introduced to by a neuro-something-ologist. Sounds official. And also I got this idea from a Charlotte Mason concept of doing shorter lessons. And I've noticed that when my kids have shorter, maybe 15, 20-minute math lessons and they're fully engaged, they gain way more from that than doing 45 minutes to an hour of let's fill in all these different pages. They're just doing it because they have to do it and they're amusing you or somebody else. But if they are doing it for that long, they're more likely to create more mistakes, thereby not really learning the thing. So if you can, really tighten up the time that they do certain things that are a little bit more tedious to them, but help them to fully engage when they're doing it, or try to create incentives for them to fully engage in it if that works for that child. So really you're training your brain not to make mistakes, not to grow in apathy or boredom towards whatever that discussion or that activity is. Make things short and sweet. And I literally mean from whatever age, maybe 4, 5, 6, if you're starting something formal, all the way to older. Really, by the time they're much older, they're doing things independently anyway. Okay, so seventh thought. Read aloud or read about learning. I have a book on my Homeschool Mama reading list by a lady named Barbara. I'm gonna forget the last name. And it's all about reading or learning about learning. When we do that, when we learn about learning or child development, it helps us to be a whole lot more realistic with our kids. Recognizing that sometimes as homeschool moms, we have them around us all the time. We kind of expect them to adultify quicker than maybe we would if they weren't with us all the time. That they engage on our same level and that they can have the capacity to do the same things on our same level. But when you read about learning to learn, and about child development, you come to understand their brains are in development. And wherever they're at, you can learn more about it. So, Steve Demme is someone that has helped us learn a lot about math concepts, math UC. And he has this rule that his approach to teaching or about learning math is to sit beside them, show them the lesson or show them the concept, and then show them again the next day or the next hour or the whatever. Keep going until they finally say to you, I would like to try it, or Mom, can I try it now? I'm like, I think I can do this. Can I just do it? And wait for them to do or give you the cue that they're ready to do it. And when they have shown you that cue, let them try it. It both lowers your expectations of, hey, you need to do this, the full page of whatever is required right now. Instead of that unrealistic expectation of them, you can actually say, first I'm going to show you this stuff, Then I'm going to wait until you're cued in or understanding, and then we're going to move to the next step. So let them try it and try it and try it again until they're ready and they've shown you that they really do get it. Make it a strategy that you approach all the different things that are your intentional learning time, so that it becomes almost more of a play time instead of an intense, I have to go to work time. And we don't want to create painful time with our math teaching or our math engagement. In fact, as an aside, I would say try to look for patterns that actually show you math without looking at a workbook at all. At the lower levels, you're definitely going to find that in the kitchen. I have a post on my blog, www.capturingthecharmedlife.com, that actually discusses the concept of finding math outside of a workbook. Okay, so assume that the conversations that you have, this is number 9, count as learning. You know, all the conversations that you have. Respond to their questions like they matter, because they're going to ask some pretty wild questions, sometimes very weird questions, sometimes some hilarious questions, and sometimes they're going to ask you stuff that you're like, that's a really good question. I have no idea. You don't have to know, but try to find out. You can't always find out. If you got a lot of kids, I had 4, that's a lot of questions at a certain period of their childhood. Still, if you can just write it down somewhere and answer it later and start realizing that some of the questions they ask completely fulfill our conventional ideas of educational school subjects, that they might spend an hour looking up all the things that actually clean up their aquarium of all that green algae, and that actually is science. So definitely remember that when they have those questions, we want to answer those questions. And the 10th thought that I have is to make fun your goal. What? This is at the end of the 10th list of practical things again? Yeah, it is. Take the serious out of your education. If it's busy work, don't do it. If it's something fun and you're like, but my kids like this and I don't know how to fit it into a school subject, do it. Play is the new educationese focus. It's the thing that's kind of the buzzword in the education system right now, is like, how do we facilitate play in the learning? So perhaps I should have a book for that. I don't have one on the top of my brain, but there is definitely a lot of discussion right now, a lot of research showing play is the way to learn every day. Okay. So you want your kid to enjoy their homeschool. They won't always, just like we won't. But the goal is play. Those are my 10 practical tips to planning your upcoming homeschool year. Again, PDF is a link in my bio. And join me for the mentoring group starting next week. We are going to do 4 live sessions, probably every Tuesday. It remains to be determined who's going to be part of the group, but we are going to, across the time zones, try to figure out a time where we can all meet virtually on Zoom. You'll get a Zoom link in advance. You'll have access to the course indefinitely. It will always be updated because I'll be routinely updating it, have already been updating it, and we'll make sure to provide you a book, my book, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Nurturing the Nurturer. I'd show you, but actually my iPad is propped up on about 9 copies right now. So be one of the people that wants a copy of this book, and I'll send it to you for free along with the journal. And there's a few other things, but if you want a link, I'll send you a link to learn more about that. And you say, so glad I do some of these already. Awesome. This is year 2. Great. You got this. You got this, girlfriend, but it really is true. These are the things you need to know. But I was homeschooled all the way through, so I remember my learning environment. That's awesome. So you've got all sorts of things to learn from both what you don't want to do in your homeschool, but also what you want to do. I actually just listened to a podcast episode, I believe it was on the Homeschool High School podcast, about another mom who was also homeschooled, and her experience, how she's homeschooled in the past 12 years. So you might want to check that out. That was very interesting to me. So I'm going to leave you with one thought by Van Gogh, to be specific. Let's see, where is it? Okay, so it is this. Great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Truth. I hope you have a great homeschool year. Talk to you soon.